Hello, everybody. It is Thursday in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined by Jason Mackey, our Post-Gazette sports columnist. On a sad day in Pittsburgh, Mike Lange passes away at the age of 76 late Wednesday night, or at least that's when we got the news. Jason, I'm getting too used to doing these videos. I did one for Franco Harris, Stan Savran not too long ago, and now we're mourning Mike Lange here in the city. Just wanted to get your initial thoughts before I ask you some questions about the legacy this legend of the franchise and of the sport really leaves behind.
Yeah, and don't be sad. That's my message to people, and Mikey would not want that. I'm going to talk a little bit about what Mike has meant to me, but I know, number one, he would not want people moping around the city. I was hit hard by this last night, as I would imagine a lot of people were. Mike meant a great deal to me in my professional career, me as a hockey fan growing up here. He was just the kindest, sweetest person you could ever meet. And obviously he was prolific as a broadcaster, and his style was so unique. Mike Lange was a California native who came here and switched sports and somehow found the perfect fit. I couldn't envision Penguins hockey, Adam, or our city, or the rich legacy that we have of broadcasters, Bob Prince, Myron Cope, etc., existing without Mike Lange and his catchphrases. My own time on the beat covering the Penguins from about 14 to 19 was enriched by Mike Lange. And I'll never forget Mike Lange telling me outside of, they're in Bell Center, outside of the Penguins dressing room in Montreal, basically that I belonged and he respected my work. And man, we can do a lot of cool stuff in this business. I'm not sure how much will ever supersede that. It just, having his respect and approval meant everything, and I thought the world of Mikey.
Yeah, I unfortunately don't have any of those personal memories, but growing up, Jason, I can speak to the legacy of him being the voice of hockey, and I did not grow up in a sports fanatic household. My dad was generally aware of what was going on in sports, but he was not the guy who's watching every game, as a lot of, I think, Pittsburgh dads are.
Yeah.
He was more the casual guy, but he still knew all the catchphrases. He'd still say, he shoots and scores. Yeah. And he'd do it with that same kind of guttural noise that came from Mike Lange. He did a great imitation, and he dropped those into casual conversation. And I've been reflecting on that because I think that's a big part of his legacy, is that he goes beyond, just the hockey community and the people who follow this team every day. He is kind of a cultural icon for the sport in Pittsburgh and beyond that. Can you speak to the way he, was able to be an ambassador for a sport that is still niche in a lot of ways? Jason, you and I have grown up with it, watched a ton of it, every playoff game, most games every night, but we know that it's still niche compared to like the NFL, even MLB and NBA. So where would the NHL be? Where would the Penguins be without that kind of voice that connected with people who may not otherwise consume the sport?
Here's where I come down on that, Adam. The Penguins for years have been built on star power, right? Mario Lemieux, Jaromir Jagr, Sidney, Crosby, Evgeni, Malkin, and a whole bunch of other guys. Mike Lange is right up there. Mike Lange is right up there. Before Mario got to town, Mike Lange was the attraction because of his goal calls, because of how he broadcast games, because of the entertainment value he provided. Fans never forgot that. Mario appreciated it. Jagr appreciated it. But it wasn't just him being, oh, here's this guy who says these silly things. It was also his pure ability as a hockey broadcaster. And you and I, we grew up watching Mike Lange and appreciating hockey because of how darn good it was. Watch another hockey broadcast and then watch Mike Lange. For maybe people who haven't seen him, his sense of anticipation, like the idea that Mikey could look down during warmups or morning skate and notice somebody had a little bit more jump. Somebody was feeling it that night. And then he'd drop a line and he'd start talking about, oh, Kevin Stevens looks like he has it together. And then here comes Kevin Stevens, 2 goals, 3 points, and wins the game. Mikey was unbelievable at that. How he was able to change the inflection of his voice in a moment that he was able to see that it was going to be important. Before the audience, before fans even knew what was happening, Mikey did. He saw the game in a way that we didn't and was able to tailor his voice to it. I mean, you add the funny catchphrases and the personality on top of it, but it's just this big pot of things that I loved and respected so much about Mikey. And just to personalize it a little bit on my own, path growing up, I grew up in a little bit of an opposite house, Adam. My dad was obsessed with hockey. My dad was obsessed with the Penguins and Mike Lange. He loved blues music. So like my dad was playing me like Robert Johnson, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Buddy Guy, Jimi Hendrix, like all this stuff from a very early age. And it's still what I listen to because it makes me think of my dad. And so when I was covering the Penguins, I told Mikey this. And Mikey and I would talk about blues music. And there was a movie I lent him once called Crossroads about a guy who sold his soul to the devil in the Delta in Mississippi. And Mikey hadn't seen it in years. And we started talking about that. But anyway, like we would go back and forth on music recommendations. And that's why I think Mikey resonated with Pittsburghers so much, because honestly, he was just the dude sitting at a bar, smoking a cigarette, playing roulette on a video machine, like listening to a blues band, hanging out. He didn't think of himself any more than that. He was a titan in his industry, but we think of Mike as our best friend. And I'm not sure there's any bigger compliment you could pay an announcer.
Well, it was the little things too beyond the catchphrases, like the night out club. And I used to work the copy desk at the Post-Gazette when I first started. Many years I'm coming home 1:30 a.m. If the Penguins are playing on the West Coast, I don't know how many people are listening to the radio broadcast at that point, because even if you are watching the game, you're probably tucked in at home. You're not in a car. But I was, and the night out club was just kind of that thing like you're talking about that made you feel like you had someone, in the car with you on the way home. And he had that ability to communicate that as well. Jason, I think it's also important to point out the context of, I think we take our sports for granted in Pittsburgh and the teams and their presence here. But the Penguins are not that franchise. They're not the Steelers. They're not the Pirates who've been around for 130 years. There have been points in time where they ran out of money and it looked like they might leave Pittsburgh. They did not. And there were a few big strokes of luck, Sidney Crosby, Mario Lemieux buying the team. Those were kind of the big things. But what role do you think Mike Lange played in the love of this franchise and the motivation to keep it in Pittsburgh even when times were difficult? Because I think that's a not insignificant piece of his legacy. I'm not going to say Mike Lange saved the Penguins, but he played an important role in branding them and making them a beloved entity in a way that I don't know that other hockey franchises are in their own markets.
No, and Mike Lange certainly played a unique part in Penguins history, as I said earlier. But as far as them staying in Pittsburgh, Adam, I mean, I think of Mike Lange staying in Pittsburgh himself. Like, we're talking about one of the greatest broadcasters to ever do it. You don't think Mike Lange, if he had career ambitions to grow his, to be on a national level or go do national TV, and he did some of that, but like, if he could do anything he wanted in the broadcasting world, he was that good. He wanted to be here. And that was a part of it. And that manifested itself in, he was an identifiable part of the franchise, just like Bob Prince was for the Pirates. He's every bit as important as the players. And like, no, I mean, there's a bunch of nuance underneath why the Penguins stayed and getting an arena and all that stuff. I mean, they didn't stay because Mike Lange was great, but he's part of what has bonded that team to this city in every bit of a way as Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr and Sidney Crosby and Evgeni Malkin. You should. And the other thing, I guess I'll just build on that before finishing the point. I wrote this in a column too. You could build a statue of Mike Lange in the city of Pittsburgh and just drop it in there tomorrow. And nobody's going to question, why is that there? It's like, no, it's a Mike Lange statue. Of course it is. Like, that's how big he is and how much he matters to this place. And I mean, I could say things about him that are positive endlessly, but how many people can we say with a sports franchise has created that bond with fans? And that's what I mean. You can't just take that away. You can't just, if you're managing something, if you're looking to position a franchise, that just can't disappear. And I don't know. I'm forever thankful that Mikey created for all of us.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to question, should the statue exist already? Did we miss an opportunity to honor him while he was here? But, I think thankfully for Penguins fans, you had him until the last 4 years in the booth still working. And that's part of his legacy too, is that he was there for so long and was the soundtrack for so much of the sports history that it was hard, I think, to imagine the franchise without him until it happened.
Yeah.
Jason, I wanted to just ask you, any other favorite memories you had? I know mine, again, this is more just observing from the outside. I never met Mike Lange, unfortunately, but my favorite was the goal call for Mario Lemieux in 2001 when Mario returned against the Toronto Maple Leafs after his, I think it was his second retirement. That was one of those nights that my dad knew was a big deal. That casual sports fan, it was one of the rare occasions when he sat the whole family down and said, "We're watching this game tonight." And so I've repeated that, on the playground at St. Valentine's School in Bethel Park, in the street, for years after that moment. But what was your favorite memory, maybe professionally and observing him rather than knowing him?
Yeah. So I'm torn. I have a few. So Mike had a unique headset. They were these Sennheiser headphones, and they were old school and looked like they're falling apart. And so one day I asked Mike, "Why do you use these?" And it started this whole conversation about like audio quality and why he prefers Sennheiser headphones. And so it's just like those little nerdy things that stand out to me. But my favorite memory, Adam, I'd be remiss if I didn't include, it's a story I did, I think it was in 2018. And it was the last game that Bob Cole, for anybody who doesn't know him, I explained him as the Canadian Al Michaels, did Hockey Night in Canada forever, just a legend in Canada. Doc Emmerich and Mike Lange. It was the last game they would broadcast together, all three of them. And so I sat with them and I convinced them. Mikey was easy. Doc was relatively easy. I had to borderline stalk Bob Cole. I found out where he was staying. For whatever reason, the front desk gave me his room number, and I called Bob Cole and I got him on the phone and convinced him I wasn't crazy. I told him what I wanted to do. So I arranged for Mikey, Doc Emmerich, and Bob Cole to sit together during the Penguins morning skate. And I said, "Can you guys just tell stories? Like, I'm going to run a recorder. I'll ask questions and facilitate the conversation. Like, I want to do a piece on the three of you being in the same place at the same time talking about hockey." Well, wouldn't you know it, it ended up, they're all talking about each other and each other's announcing styles and how much they love about one another. And, Mikey is, of course, every bit as important and talented as Doc and Bob Cole, but it just led to such a fun conversation, a fun piece. So it was one of the things I don't like to talk about myself publicly and celebrate myself often, but like that was a darn good idea. And it worked out extremely well because of those guys.
Yes, I remember that one, Jason. That was a fun read. Definitely look it up on the website if you're enjoying the video today. Certainly a great way to remember Mike Lange on this day. Jason, I guess I'll wrap up the segment on this. Was Mike Lange, and I guess you can put Bill Hillgrove in this category as well, the last of the true radio broadcasting stars we might ever have? Guys who you turned on over the television to listen to. Obviously, Pittsburgh's got talented broadcasters now. Rob King on the Steelers, but I think people think of him more as his work for so many years in television, primarily rather than the Steelers radio announcer. Of course, you got the guys with the Pirates. I know you're working with Steve Blass, Greg Brown for a podcast that's coming out Saturday, but The Pirates rotate their guys through radio and TV. So it's not like there's a single one of them that kind of sticks out as a solo, kind of radio guy, the way Mike Lange did late in his career. How do you think of his legacy in that way as kind of a dying breed of announcer that we may never see again?
I don't think he's a dying breed, Adam. I don't. I think Mikey is a legend and one of the best to ever do it. I also think a lot about the announcers we have in the city. And people may disagree with me, and I don't care. I've gone plenty of other places, watched plenty of other broadcasts, and I think the world of Greg Brown and Joe Block and the job they do. I think Josh Getzoff is an extremely talented young announcer. I think Rob King, you might identify him with doing a lot of different sports, but that's what he's done. He just finished his first season on Steelers. Rob King busts his tail. I know because I stand next to him and watch him do it. The same with Josh or Joe Brand on Penguins. There's no traditional, I think of him more as a radio guy. He's more of a TV guy. I mean, that's like saying, well, he's only a print newspaper writer. He doesn't host a podcast. He doesn't, do video. Like, we all do everything now. That's the change of the industry. And, if I look at the Pirates, I think Greg Brown it's criminal how underrated he is. And you know what? Joe Block is darn good on radio. He really is. And maybe he's more of a radio guy and Brownie's more of a TV guy. I don't know. Maybe they end up flipping Getzoff and Brand. But I think the only thing that you can say with those guys is, one, nobody's ever going to be Mike Lange. But two, Mike Lange was who he was because he was doing it for so long and created this legacy. So, no, there's never going to be another Mike Lange. But I bristle at the idea that, we're never going to have good or entertaining broadcasters or something like that. I'll defend the voices in this city for a long time because I think they're really good.
No, I do too. I think it's a question of like the medium itself, I guess, is more what I was driving.
Yeah, and I'm not barking back at you, Adam. I mean, I'm just answering something that I hear in a sentiment that is out there that, I want to defend because I know these people and I know the work they put in. But yeah, I get your point. Like the medium is different and these like traditional and what it's been like. So in that sense, yes, I get it. I don't know. I get defensive if people question our announcers because I don't think they should.
No, and I certainly don't want to come across that way. I think it's just a matter of, the changing economic landscape of media, which you pointed out correctly. Here you and I are doing a podcast. Neither of us went to school to do this, but I certainly enjoy these chats we have every Thursday. Jason, any final thoughts here before we move on to some Four Nations and some college football talk?
No, but just to recap my thoughts on Mike, don't be depressed today. Don't. I lost my dad at an age that was too young at 2018, and my dad would have been just so mad at me if I walked around, sad and down and just, frittered away time with my family or time working or something like that. Mikey was pretty darn similar. He wouldn't want anybody being depressed today. So smile a little bit. Absolutely. That's a great message, Jason. Everyone else, stay tuned. We are going to talk a little actual hockey here on the ice. And we're going to also talk a little bit about Penn State football, Jason's column on that. Before we do, just want to thank a couple of sponsors. This show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder and Associates. If you're injured in an accident, you're probably wondering what's next. For over 40 years, Edgar Snyder and Associates has helped injury victims answer that question, whether it's gathering evidence, collecting medical records, or dealing with the insurance company. Edgar Snyder and Associates has helped over 75,000 people handle what's next. Call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Also have a message from our friends down in Bradenton, Florida.
Embrace the laid-back charm of island life while sinking your toes in the sand and discovering real, authentic Florida in the Bradenton area. Unspoiled beauty and pristine beaches, a vibrant waterfront downtown energized by local arts and culture, fresh Floridian cuisine with a flourish of rich history, and friendly locals ready to welcome you to this preserved paradise on Florida's Gulf Coast. Plan your visit today at BradentonGulfIslands.com.
All right, Jason, we are back here on our weekly chat. I'm Adam Bittner, assistant sports editor for Multimedia. You are our sports columnist at the Post-Gazette. We're talking Four Nations face-off. The championship is tonight, Thursday, as we're recording this, between Team USA and Team Canada. Big game. First meeting over the weekend had a lot of booing, a lot of fights, and a defensive clinic by the United States to beat Canada to advance to the championship game. How much of that do you see repeating itself tonight in Boston with Mike Sullivan, the coach of the United States, on one side and the Penguins captain, Sidney Crosby, on the other? Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of it repeating, Adam. I see a lot of the emotion. I don't know if we're going to see 3 fights in 9 seconds. I wouldn't complain if we did, but I'm not exactly going to take that one to the bank. I think this one will be a little bit – it'll be played with the gloves mostly on. Now, do I expect national anthems to be booed? Yeah. Do I expect guys to be finishing their checks and for it to be a tight checking game with not a lot of space out there? Absolutely. I think that's a reasonable expectation. I do worry, and I've thought really highly of the work Mike Sullivan has done. In-game adjustments, how he's juggling his lines, personnel decisions. It's not been an easy road for Team USA, but I thought Mike Sullivan has really shown himself to be the top-notch hockey coach that he is in this event. It's funny how Mike Sullivan's teams can protect leads when they have some better players, but
what I'm expecting, probably a Team Canada win. As much as it pains me to say this, I'd be lying if I wasn't there. I find it so hard and so impossible to wrap my head around either one of these teams beating the other one twice in the same tournament. So I think Sidney Crosby is going to get it done. As an American, I wish it was different, but if I'm going to think with my hockey watching logical brain, I think I'm probably going Team Canada here.
I want to talk about Sidney Crosby in this tournament in a minute. I did want to mention the fights, though, in the mayhem in the last meeting. You loved it. I saw you on Twitter. You're all about it. And listen, I'm not a ban fighting in hockey guy. I think fighting has its place. But I'll be honest. I turned it on and I said, why are you turning this into a gong show? I mean, you don't need – I didn't think the matchup needed that to get people's attention. I think there were a lot of outside fans already tuning in, people that don't watch the NHL every night, who wanted to see a national game, because I saw a lot of people who don't tweet about hockey in my timeline tweeting about hockey, but they were already watching. And I thought, this is a showcase event. Is this really what you want to show the country and the world when you know, Saturday night primetime on ABC, a great slot? That was my only qualm with all of that.
How much do you think the ratings were influenced by those fights, Adam? Do you think they have the ratings that they do without those fights?
I don't know, man.
There's no way. No. I'm not saying that's a reason to do it, but I do think the ratings would be different if they didn't have the fights at the beginning. I think your casual hockey fans would maybe look at that and see, oh, it's exciting, but there's other stuff on. It's Saturday night. We're going to find something else to do. I'm not going to stay in front of it. The idea of fisticuffs as an entry point into this thing, and it almost becoming a little bit of a gong show, and something that immediately the sports world started talking about on Twitter. I mean, that's part of the charm here. I also think the juxtaposition with the NBA skills competition is hilarious. I also think it's why the NHL All-Star Game did something significant. Like, we're a little bit post-Pro Bowl. The NBA is going through this ridiculous thing where guys aren't even attempting to score and like throwing basketballs, goofy plays. And you're seeing these videos go against one another the same night on Twitter. And people are like, what's going on here? I want to be a part of this thing. I want to watch this. And then you're hooking casual fans who otherwise wouldn't care because of chatter on social media over these fights. And then they're drawn in, and then they're seeing really good, exciting hockey. It's not hard to watch that at the beginning and just appreciate every inch of ice being contested, guys finishing checks, incredible goals being scored. So I don't think it was necessary, but I do think it helped. And I mean, I try not to make any of my sports coverage political, or, you know, even my social media stuff political. I don't think it has any place here. But people, my opinion on the anthem stuff is, you're allowed to say what you want. As a sports fan, you want to boo, you go ahead and boo. You want to demonstrate, you go ahead and demonstrate. I'm also allowed to dislike it. I'm also allowed to dislike hearing our national anthem get booed. And I'm guessing that a lot of people felt similar to me, and that then you're seeing those actions, that frustration being exhibited by players on Team USA. And so I think a lot of people enjoyed that too.
Jason, I did want to ask you about Sidney Crosby and how his legacy, his legacy is probably the wrong word, but I think this has been a reminder that he's still that dude. And we talked about this a little bit last week, how the NHL marketing efforts around this tournament, around just the general, strategy has revolved so much around Connor McDavid. And he certainly had his moments in this tournament, but do you think there's any extent to which Sidney Crosby reminded Canada and the guys in the league office in Toronto that they're lucky that he's still around in the sport, and still maybe not quite at the height of his powers, but still one of the best players in the league?
Well, he didn't need to remind anybody, I don't think, on his team, on the bench, in that dressing room, around hockey. League executives, maybe. I don't know. It does seem like the NHL gets a little, and this is what we talked about, Adam, a little too youth happy, where, they're going to hand you a lot of Connor McDavid, even Nathan McKinnon, or, whatever. Don't forget about Sid. Yeah. But I mean, nobody did. Look at him in international competition. Look at what guys are saying about him in the tournament. And I mean, he is the greatest winner of our lifetime in hockey history, top 5, and you think about Sid's legacy, it is winning. Yes, there's been prolific plays. He's accumulated points. He's been a leader, all this stuff. But I mean, it's a pretty good umbrella to put all that stuff in when you talk about winning. The guy is just a winner. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are some people that probably overlooked it and didn't wrap enough of a marketing strategy around the old guy that we've been doing this for 20 years with. They would be wrong. But I don't think anybody who's watched and truly appreciated these games is surprised to see Sidney Crosby doing what he's doing.
I don't know if I agree with that, Jason, because Connor McDavid is getting asked about. It was a pretty famous clip now of Connor McDavid being asked who the captain should be, as if there was any debate, and it wasn't in Connor McDavid's mind, but it was in the mind of the person asking the question. And so I think that's what I'm saying. Me here.
Okay, all right. So I mean, Connor McDavid said it should be Sid, but
it shouldn't be a question to me, Jason. It shouldn't be a question that's asked in Canada.
It would be if it was flipped. We would sure as heck ask Sid about it if Connor McDavid was named captain. And I mean, like, you don't think Connor McDavid deserves to be asked a question about captaining Team Canada? I mean, he's a better individual player right now than Sid. I'm not saying he's a better overall player. I'm not saying he has a better legacy, but who has won more trophies? Who has scored more points? That's Connor McDavid. And I'm not even saying he should be captain of Team Canada. He shouldn't. It should be Sid. But like, you can ask him his feelings on Sid being the captain, and then he's going to say exactly what he said, which is fine. Adam, if you're going to talk about Canadian media, I don't think that Canadian media think that Connor McDavid should be the captain of Team Canada. I mean, it should be Sid. Sid is lauded. The media is not who we're talking about here. We're talking about marketing in the NHL, right? Like, suits up top. And even so, even saying that they don't get it, I'm not sure that is true. Like, you've seen the NHL commercial where Crosby at the end, he's like, kids these days, like, they have a little bit of that. I just think they should lean into it more. Appreciate Sid more.
Yeah, I think the run that sticks out to me is Ray Bourque with the Avalanche. What was that in 2002, and how he was kind of the face of hockey for that year. There should be more celebration of veterans like that. And we talked about last week, Ovechkin belongs in the same category, even though he's not part of this tournament. And his chase for history certainly feels like it is a much bigger deal. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that it kind of mutes it a little bit is team success, in my opinion, for Sid. Like, if the Penguins were winning and doing this, obviously Ovechkin's different, right? Like, the Capitals are in a much better place, much different place than the Penguins. If the Penguins were winning, I think the NHL writ large would be talking more about Sid and giving him more of his just due. I think the lack of team success is hurt.
Yeah, that's certainly a fair point too. Jason, I want to get out of the segment on this. I know you wrote about Penn State this week, how you believe that they should be one of the favorites to win the college football playoff national championship a year from now. Obviously, I went to Penn State. This is something of my wheelhouse, so I'm going to ask the question from the perspective of the skeptical alum here. I still don't see what they need at receiver, and I think that's the biggest hang up for me. I think there's a lot of things that you have coming back. Drew Aller, hopefully will be better for Penn State. You're going to have Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, possibly putting historic, all-time rushing leader numbers together next season. You have a tight end to be excited about in Luke Reynolds. You're bringing Dennis-Sutton back to maybe take that Abdul Carter step this season in this defense. But in some ways, I think it still is structurally the same team without a difference maker at wide receiver than the team that lost in the Orange Bowl. And I think this is the big thing after Ohio State and Michigan these last couple of years is I think Penn State is probably capable of beating any team in the sport, but I don't know if they have the ability to look dominant late in the season the way Michigan and Ohio State did. What's your read on that situation?
Well, I don't think being about the same as what they were last year is a bad thing. I mean, I think if Drew Aller grows up a little bit and makes a couple different decisions at the end of that game, I think they could beat Notre Dame. I really do. I've loved what Katron Allen and Nick Singleton have done. They're bringing back a whole bunch up front. I mean, you're basically returning 4 or 5 starters, 5 players overall. They should be able to have an identity as a run-first team and explosive playmakers. I agree with you on the wide receiver stuff. I'm not going to disagree whatsoever. I mean, Kyron Hudson, Devontae Ross, 2 guys they picked up in the transfer portal. maybe they work out. I like them better than the options that they had, but I understand if you look at last year and, you picked up Julian Fleming from Ohio State and you're thinking that he's going to translate into a playmaker and he doesn't. And, basically I'm saying that if they can get anything from that group of wide receivers, Adam, that's what's going to take them there, in my opinion. I think they have the rest of that stuff figured out. Their defensive line should again be good. Jim Knowles coming in here. Like, I didn't see that coming. I don't know about you. We're talking about the guy who coordinated the best defense in the country, a national champion. That's how they're going to make this thing better. I like that. I mean, they have the talent at the school. It's a matter of positioning it in the right place on the field. And some of these other teams have been hit hard by graduation. I don't doubt that Ohio State's going to be in the mix. Believe me, I don't doubt that Texas is going to be in the mix, but they do have to replace key pieces, especially on offense, and Penn State largely does not.
Yeah, I certainly think there's reason for optimism, and I don't want to poo-poo Penn State's chances next year. I think this is probably the most optimistic if you're a Penn State fan you've been in a long time, because even if you have that one damaging loss in the season, you're not necessarily out of it. The way we learned with Ohio State this season, it's just a matter of the consistency for me, especially in big games. Sure. Jason, you mentioned Julian Fleming. Heroic effort on some of those fourth downs in Los Angeles against USC to keep the season alive, but he wasn't able to make that translate after that point. And Penn State recent history is replete with guys who are able to have one huge game. I think of Trey Wallace in the West Virginia opener this season. You watched that game and said, man, Penn State has their guy, and then he disappeared like Keandre Lambert-Smith did late in the season. So can these guys they brought in, can some of these homegrown guys, can they be consistent, even if they're not like, I'm not asking them to be Jeremiah Smith. I'm asking them to be like Dion Butler, Derek Williams, Jordan Norwood, solid, consistent dudes to make the plays when Penn State needs them. Jason, we are going to do our third segment on baseball, but we're going to move that on over to our Pirates channel. So if you want to hear some baseball talk between me and Jason, make sure you subscribe to that channel. We're going to head over there after a quick break. See you on the other side.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.